My name is Leticia Aguilar, and I'm a member of the Pineleville Pomo Nation tribe. I was born and raised here in Sacramento. I'm director of Native Dads Network and founder of Native Sisters Circle, also here in Sacramento. Yeah, when it comes to like raising awareness behind suicide prevention, I just want to say that culture is a really important component of that prevention part and intervention because of the traditional ways that our people used to practice and still practice today. Uh, so, for example, there are ways that we would deal with certain things that are going on in our communities, and those ways were done through maybe song, maybe ceremony, also using our plant medicine. And I would say there was a time where mental health really did not exist in our communities. That poor mental health, there was ways that we can, come together, and we had a sense of belonging in tribe. There's a story that was told that I want to share. There was a time, long time ago, where the women, they would go to the water and they would wash their clothes, and they would spend time at the water gathering, um, and it was part of their routine as what they did as tribal people, is gather at that water space. And then there was something that was invented, and slowly the women stopped washing their clothes in the water, and that invention was a washer. And but with that invention, our women, they didn't gather, and there started to become like mental health, like depression, or these little things that they didn't know that were affecting them eventually. And just because they didn't gather anymore and they didn't share that time together, and so it could be the smallest thing that affects us that we don't know. And something as small as like an invention of a washer, right? That kind of took our people away from that cultural practice. And so culture is important because even in the hard times, there's ways that our people dealt with things. And today, our boys are being taught not to cry. Our girls are, and all of our community members are being taught that there's a stigma behind mental health. There's something wrong with them. In reality, that's not the case. Everyone should be able to cry. Like, that's a form of healing. And our people used to have cry songs to help release that, cry ceremonies that help to, pray for our people that were going through those tough struggles. And so being able to integrate culture into what we do today is slowly, healing our people. And it's a part of that healing practice that is needed, that is vital for tribal people because we're connected. We're all connected in that way. And so whether we know if we need it or not, um, our spirit knows. And so it is a very important part of practicing that healing component within, especially within urban settings, and then rural settings as well, where it's been taken away. Um, and and then not to mention the impacts of the historical trauma that was, a time where our people lived in harmony and in connection with Mother Earth and connection with one another, pre-contact. Um, and so once, we had that historical trauma, that genocide, all of these historical factors come into our communities that we don't want to talk about. Um, Once that happened, it created a trauma on our people. And so that trauma, we are directly impacted by it, even though we know it or not, because of the epigenetics. And the epigenetics says that if there was some trauma along the line that happened to our people, it's passed down to us through that genetic code. And so sometimes we do struggle with these mental health issues and we don't know why. But it's just in our DNA as tribal people because of the mass genocide in all of the horrific things that happened to our ancestors. And so we are connected in so many ways. In that historical trauma is a big part of why our people struggle today, and they either turn to suicide or they turn to alcoholism and self-medicating, in which again that's not our culture. And so the more that we practice our cultural ways or we teach our cultural ways, we can say, hey, you can put the bottle down. Hey, you don't have to get high, or you don't have to hide that hurt. There's ways that we can deal with it. Yeah, so not a lot of people realize how high the statistics are. And the reason why the statistics are so high is because there's such a small percentage of us. And so we cannot lose not one more. That would be a very high percentage. And so one is too much. But I would say within our communities, we are thriving with resiliency. We are thriving ceremonial people. We have songs, we have dances, we have people that still actively, what would you say? We have people that today still are able to offer I would say, we have people today that still practice plant medicine versus having to go to pharmaceutical. And not to say that pharmaceutical doesn't help, but just to say that we still have those medicine people, we still have those elders, we have humor, like just something as small as humor that is within our culture that we use and has been used to get us through those hard times. Our youth are very strong, and just being a part of a tribe or being a part of a community, or just having our families alone at home, within that family setting is thriving with so much culture and resiliency. Like this alone, has been something that has gotten our tribes and our people through like those toughest times. Also, when we talk about resiliency, we have so much resiliency within our communities as people because we know and we teach our children the true histories of what our ancestors went through, the sacrifices that our ancestors sacrificed, whether if it was their lives or their livelihood. Maybe they had to assimilate, like my gram, she had to assimilate, and that was part of her protecting us so we can survive in the city. And so there's so many strength-based practices that our people have embedded in them that has helped us survive that genocide and that historical trauma, and which is why we're still here today. And so it's a beautiful thing that we're able to be here today and teach these things. And not to mention the Freedom of Religion Act. Like there was a time where we couldn't sing our songs. There was a time where we couldn't dance our dances, or even, have, our ribbon skirts, our regalia, because it was illegal. I would just like to also raise awareness around promoting more strength-based verbiage around the word suicide prevention. And yes, we are predominantly English speakers in society today, and we do have to speak about the word suicide and suicide prevention in a lot of our programming. But when we're creating programming, let's say empowering words. Let's tell our youth, you belong here. Our ancestors prayed for you, and use the power of words to change that narrative and that stigma behind suicide and what that means.